Mexico's new ambassador tours Arizona's border region.
The challenge for us as a representative of Mexico, is to change the image of Mexico in the United States.
Made in Pinal County, the electric car business headed to our state.
The site that we've located has been carefully selected, as Brian has said, having scoured the US extensively.
How much power does the president have? A constitutional lawyer explains.
There actually is quite a bit that he can do, both in his capacity as commander-in-chief and in his capacity as the chief executive of the federal executive branch.
Plus, desert snowfall ushering in a winter wonderland. Those stories and more next on Arizona Week. Hello and thanks for joining us. Mexico's new ambassador to the U.S. visited Arizona this week, and he says from the state's eastern to western border, it's the place with the most potential. In an interview with Arizona Public Media's Nancy Montoya, Carlos Malasada said the recent election is a time for opportunity.
I was wondering how you reacted personally to the elections here in the U.S. Were you following it very closely?
Actually, I was following minute by minute, not only the day of the election, but like a year before, yes. Because it has a lot of implications for us, and also governors and some mayors and judges. And
so you got to look at everything.
Everything, because our community is all over. And it is not just a coincidence that we have 50 consulates in the United States, which is a unique case in the world.
NAFTA is a big deal here in Arizona, and there's a lot of fear around changes that may be in the future for NAFTA. And you've said that NAFTA needs to be modernized a bit. What did you mean by modernized?
Well, we have to understand NAFTA has been in place for 22 years. Mm-hmm. And when NAFTA was signed, there were very few, if any, trade agreements of the complexity of the one that we signed with Canada and the United States. So a lot of things have happened since then. I think it has been very good for the three of us. But now that there is new alternatives, and TPP is one of them, you are following what is happening in TPP. Well, it seems that the United States is not going to present it to the Congress to be debated. It's up to the United States. What we are doing right now, as we speak, it is being discussed in the Senate of Mexico, perhaps in a couple of weeks before the ending of the session in the Congress of Mexico, 15th of December. We can have something. We do not know. It's up to the Congress of Mexico. But from there is a lot of different ingredients that were not present at that time when we signed the agreement. So it is, for instance, e-trade. That's one point, or the more incorporation of small and medium-sized industries, or some other issue related to labor mobility, perhaps. So, but we do not know exactly what United States and Canada are thinking of, so we cannot anticipate because we do not know exactly what they are thinking about it.
A worker program, are you seeing that as a real possibility in the future between the U.S. and Mexico, some kind of a workers program?
Well, there are a lot of things that could be moved around a possible immigration reform, perhaps and not the
Would that be a benefit for Mexico, though?
Well, I think it'll be the benefit for the two of us again, because there is a need of labor here. I'm coming from California, where I went to visit all the agricultural fields, but the same is true for the northern part of the state of New York. And we opened a consulate in Milwaukee, the last one. Why? Because in Wisconsin there is Mexican workers in different fields. So it is something that could be of the convenience of the two of us. You remember that when NAFTA was signed, there were two key issues that were not put on the table. One of them was energy. Mm-hmm. Mexico didn't want to. We are not in possibilities. And the other one was labor. The United States didn't want to really open that. So now, after some time, Mexico opened unilaterally the issue of energy, and still pending to see what happens in immigration reform. Why? Because it's been already 30 years, 1986, since the last immigration reform happened in the United States. So in the meantime, There has been a lot of a lot of bills presented, but nothing has happened. So there is a big lag in this issue. And when people talk about immigration or the 11 and a half undocumented immigrants, automatically everybody thinks that all of them are from Mexico, which is not true.
Right.
Only half of them perhaps are from Mexico, and the rest is from overstayers that come from the rest of the world, because it's been 30 years since there hasn't been any reform in that sense. So we have a program with Canada. People go to Canada every year for 9 to 10 months. They go back to Mexico every single year, and there is no problem with that program. So what we cut, or it was cut, it was the circularity of people moving back and forth from one country to the other. I think that's something to analyze.
When you came here to Nogales, you got the key to the city, which was a big deal for the people here in Nogales. What are you seeing in terms of our border communities, and how can our border communities do better? I mean, there's a lot of struggles going on in many of our border communities, not just on the U.S. side, but also on the Mexican side. What's the solution to that?
Well, actually, I see the border that is evolving tremendously. In these last 5 months that I've been in Mexico, I've been 3-4 times to the border and witnessing what is happening there, the new developments, and how the two societies keep participating. But it's, again, a distortion of reality. When people say in the U.S. it's very unsafe, and says, well, take the border in cities. They are the safest in the United States. If you take El Paso, if you take Brownsville, if you take McAllen, here in Nogales. So from that perspective, it is not that unsafe. It is less safe, let's say, in the Mexican part. And we have to do our job in order to have it safer. The point is that everybody, two of us, wants the border to have two main characteristics: safe and efficient.
How would you analyze the relationship between the U.S. and Mexico? How's it grown? How's it changed over the years? We've seen a lot of changes in the past 3 decades.
Well, actually, I'm a witness of what has been happening, because I've been long enough in the United States, not only judging from the perspective of big cities like New York or Washington, but traveling all over, because my responsibility, for instance, when I was Consul General in Chicago, my jurisdiction was the state of Illinois, the state of Wisconsin, the state of Minnesota, and the state of Indiana. So I had to travel all over and meeting with mayors and with business leaders. So I've seen, nobody told me, I lived this situation throughout all these years, and I'm really very stimulated and motivated that the relationship keeps working and that keeps improving, and the societies keep being more and more integrated.
What's the message you would like to send to the American public about Mexico, about where Mexico stands in relationship with the U.S. and the partnership? What's the message to the American public?
That it has to be judged from a very fair perspective. Mexico, by any means, it is the enemy. Actually, we are the best partners as allies, as I said. Strategically, it is very convenient for the two countries to work together. And it is in the best interest of the United States of America to have a partner like Mexico that is solid, that is prosperous, that is secure. So that is the message. And the more we understand this very deep concept, the more we are going to move forward and have better societies, and of course project this region as the most important and the most productive that already exists, but we need to continue doing better.
Before departing Arizona, Ambassador Sada awarded Pima Community College $80,000 in scholarships for immigrants and Americans of Mexican descent. It's the third time the Foreign Relations Institute for Mexicans Abroad has awarded the community college with a grant. Also in Tucson this week, Claudia Ruiz Masu, the Secretary of Foreign Affairs of Mexico. This week's visit marks her third time in Arizona in less than a year. As you heard Ambassador Sada say, there are some things Mexico's government will be watching for when President-elect Donald Trump takes office. Mr. Trump has said he'd build a wall, eliminate the trade agreement known as NAFTA, and deport millions of undocumented immigrants. So how feasible are those things? How much power does a president really have? To break that down for us, I spoke with Andrew Cohen, a constitutional law professor at the University of Arizona Rogers College of Law.
To repeal any legislation or to actually declare war on a foreign nation, President Trump would need the cooperation of Congress. But there actually is quite a bit that he can do, both in his capacity as Commander-in-Chief and in his capacity as the Chief Executive of the federal executive branch, to act and have a significant impact, both domestically and internationally, on his own.
At no point can the president make a decision without having someone do the fact-checking and be sure it's according to the Constitution.
Well, I think that's putting it a little bit strong. There are many contexts in which the president has wide latitude to make decisions on his own without the cooperation of the legislative branch and without a meaningful risk that the courts will step in and push back on his decisions. His position as chief executive officer of the United States executive branch, which oversees the enforcement of federal environmental regulations, federal health regulations, federal workplace regulations, as well as all federal criminal prosecutions, is an enormously important power, and one in which the president exercises enormous and virtually unchecked, at least unchecked by Congress or the courts, unchecked constitutional authority. And the president, at least a highly motivated president, could potentially use that authority to make pretty major changes, as President Obama did at times during his second term especially, and as President George W. Bush did before him. The president has quite a lot of power. The president is the commander-in-chief of the United States Armed Forces, which carries a lot of power. The president is also the head of the federal executive branch, which includes administrative agencies like the Environmental Protection Agency, the agency which is charged with administering the carbon dioxide regulations, the greenhouse gas regulations that President Obama pushed during his second term of office, as well as the Department of Justice, the federal law enforcement agency, which decides whom to prosecute and for what offenses. The president is also in charge of immigration enforcement, which is the purview of the Department of Homeland Security, another federal agency which comes under the president's direct authority. So acting wholly by himself, the president enjoys quite a lot of power in his capacity as the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces and as the Chief Executive of the United States, the head of the federal executive branch.
On the campaign trail, Donald Trump had said that he would deport millions of undocumented immigrants. He's since dialed it back a bit to maybe criminal undocumented immigrants. How likely is that to happen? How easy is it to do that?
Well, it's pretty complicated. The first challenge is a budgetary challenge. Congress has currently appropriated only only enough funds to deport roughly on the order of 400,000 immigrants in a given year, and to deport many more than that, certainly to deport the 3 or 4 million that President-elect Trump has talked about in recent public statements, would almost certainly require an infusion of greater resources, which is to say, a piece of legislation passed by both houses of Congress and signed by the president appropriating additional resources to be used to fund this sort of massive deportation effort. Another set of challenges is practical. It is simply quite difficult to track down and apprehend 3 to 4 million people who are intent on avoiding detection.
We're hearing a lot of concern from dreamers or families who are undocumented here. Is there reason for these families to worry that they could have to go back to their home country?
Well, again, I'm not an immigration law expert, but given the promises that President-elect Trump made during the campaign, and given some of the statements that we have heard from President Trump, or President-elect Trump rather, and his advisors since the election early last month, there is a real chance that President-elect Trump will undertake to deport a substantial number of undocumented immigrants, and a real chance that President Trump will overturn the executive orders issued by President Obama, which authorized the Dreamers, the so-called Dreamers, to remain in the United States without imminent threat of deportation and conferred upon them some limited legal benefits, as well as the broader and more controversial executive order issued by the president, which granted relief from deportation or deferred action on deportation to a much broader class of undocumented immigrants.
With respect to the Affordable Care Act, there are people who are watching that to see if their health insurance will change. How likely is that to occur?
Well, I think that some change to the Affordable Care Act is pretty likely. The president on his own does not, of course, have the authority to repeal a piece of legislation like the Affordable Care Act, which was passed by both houses of Congress and signed by President Obama. He would need the cooperation of both the Senate and the House of Representatives in order to actually repeal the Affordable Care Act, as he promised to do and as the Republican Party has promised to do for a long time now. He's likely to have quite a bit of support in Congress since the Republicans enjoy majorities in both the House and the Senate, and I think that there's a pretty strong likelihood of some legislation affecting, if not completely repealing, the Affordable Care Act passing Congress in the relatively near term. In the meantime, before Congress acts, the president does have the authority, is the person who's chiefly in charge of administering the Affordable Care Act and enforcing the regulations that were adopted as part of the Affordable Care Act, including the individual mandate, which requires all Americans, virtually all Americans, to purchase health insurance, as well as the regulations of the insurance industry, which ban things like discriminating against people with pre-existing conditions. And as the person charged with enforcing those various regulations, the president has a lot of power to determine how vigorously those regulations are enforced. And a president determined to undercut the Affordable Care Act, to weaken its regulations of the insurance industry and of private individuals' decisions about whether to purchase health insurance, could go a long way without actually repealing the Affordable Care Act itself toward undercutting its enforcement.
One of the issues many will be watching is the future of the Affordable Care Act. This week, President-elect Trump announced he will nominate Congressman Tom Price as health secretary. The Georgia representative is a physician and a vocal opponent of the Affordable Care Act. On the campaign trail, Mr. Trump said he wanted to eliminate the program, and more recently has said he'll make some changes. Jim Hammond is the publisher of the Hertel Report, a go-to for the healthcare industry in Arizona.
I think that if there is a complete rollback and the 25 million people across the country lose their coverage, then absolutely yes. Then that's going to create a tsunami of effects where individuals will have problems getting themselves taken care of, and then also providers will end up having to write off large amounts of uncompensated care. But I don't think that's what's going to happen.
Changes to the Affordable Care Act, what does that do to the economy of healthcare providers, hospital associations, clinics?
Well, if there is no funding source for people to pay for their care, then that's a great impact on providers. They're going to have to find that money somewhere else. And the traditional way that health providers go and get that money is they go to the health plans and they say, hey, look, our uncompensated care has gone up because of whatever this circumstance is. And so now people that do pay their claims need to pay more. And that cost shifting is what's gotten us into this trouble in the first place, is that we're asking these insurance companies to pay us more for health care. They've got to then go ask the employers and the consumers for more money as well.
We hear that health insurance premiums are rising dramatically. Is that accurate?
I would say that's accurate, yes. For this year, it's been a very dramatic increase in Arizona. People forget that we had increases before the ACA was passed, but we averaged somewhere between 6 and 8% going into the ACA, and then it flattened out for the first few years of the ACA, and now there's kind of a correction going on where a lot of the health plans frankly underbid what they were going to be, what they needed in order to pay claims. So they were very competitive, and in order to get members to choose you, you had to have a low price. So the first couple of years of the ACA, especially in Arizona, that competition drove price way down. And now we're correcting for that. And the health plans have realized that they attracted sick people, and those sick people are costly. And so now they're going and trying to make up for those shortfalls that they had in those first few years.
When the ACA went into effect, we heard a lot about how providers would be impacted negatively. Is that what you saw in Arizona?
Well, no, I don't think so. More people with coverage is a good thing. So the hospitals in general saw a fairly significant decrease in uncompensated care after the ACA went into effect. The Medicaid expansion helped them with their uncompensated care with the low-income folks, and then so did the ACA plans. The 200,000 or so people that gained coverage through the insurance companies now have somebody to help them pay their bills, and that's good for hospitals and for doctors as well.
What are you telling medical groups right now, or as they come to your publication to seek advice, or
right.
How do they prepare for the next few months?
Well, I think that there's no question that the move to value-based medicine is on, and that's not going to change. Everything that I read, that the Republicans have put out, that Trump has put out, is very supportive of the move to value-based medicine. And there's a lot in the ACA that people don't realize, and one of them is called the ACO, the Accountable Care Organization. These organizations were supported by CMS, by the federal government, to get started to help providers come together and ferret out waste and figure out better ways to provide high quality care at a lower cost. And those organizations are going strong. They're moving forward. They're doing what they're supposed to do. And so that's all going on no matter what. And everything that I'm reading says that that will continue. Whether the ACA gets repealed, replaced, amended, any of those things, the move to value-based care and the pressure on providers to be more efficient is moving forward without fail.
Based on your observations, it looks like Donald Trump may be keeping most of, if not some key components.
It sounds like he likes a lot of it. I've done a little analysis of my own, and he likes about 80% of what's in the bill. There's 10% that he doesn't like, and then there's 10% I'm not so sure yet. But there's a lot in this law that he likes. It says universal coverage, so does his goals say universal coverage. There's a few things that are different that he's added to the mix. The ability for individuals to write off, to deduct the cost of their health insurance premiums. That's new to the ACA. It's not in there now, but I think that's a novel idea. It's a good idea to give individuals the same breaks that they give employers. But the covering pre-existing conditions, he's said that many, many times, that he thinks that that's extremely important. And so that's a big part of this law. And that's really why the insurance companies are in this and they have the mandate, is because the only way it works for insurance companies to cover sick people is if everyone comes in and gets coverage. And so that's where the mandate was connected to this guarantee issue. What I'm seeing is that it's more likely that this is going to be an amendment, a fix, or a tweak, if you will. You know, that's the term that a lot of us have been using, is this does not need to be completely gutted. You know, because you don't like the mandate doesn't mean you should throw everything else out. There's a lot in this law that people don't realize. The guarantee issue, the community rating, so that we don't punish people that already have an illness. That is a bedrock of this law. It's also exactly what Trump is saying he wants to continue to have. He wants to continue to have the insurance companies take all comers and not push people away if they're sick. So I think it's better than a lot of people think. It's not going to be this gutting or this throwing the baby out with the bathwater, that it's more of a fix and it's a tweak that we need to do to make it work right.
Different news now, an automotive plant coming to Arizona by way of Pinal County. The announcement made Tuesday in Phoenix. Lucid, an electric car company, chose Casa Grande after visiting 60 sites in 13 states.
Here, our team has access to an excellent workforce, forward-thinking institutions, and a strong regional supply chain, which certainly includes the state of Sonora, Mexico.
In Casa Grande, Lucid acquires a strategic location that offers existing infrastructure, a talent pool that is strong, and a short plane ride from their headquarters.
Rolled out at the Capitol this week, a prototype vehicle.
This is going to be a fine driving machine, 1,000 horsepower. It's all electric, it will have cutting-edge technology, and we will offer a version with up to 400-mile range, which has not been done before.
At the announcement, the governor of Sonora, where some of the car parts will be manufactured.
I want to thank Lucid Motors for your decisions to settle in Arizona and be supplied by Sonora. You will not regret it.
Governor Doug Ducey said this relationship is a year in the making and something he hopes sends a message to other businesses.
Regardless of what business you're in, your ingenuity and creativity have the opportunity to flourish in Arizona. When government takes a backseat to innovation, big things can happen.
Lucid is expected to bring some 2,000 jobs to Arizona by 2022. Also this week, Governor Ducey appointed 2 new justices to the Arizona Supreme Court. The 2 joined 5 others on Arizona's highest court. Andrew Gould served on the Arizona Court of Appeals and Yuma County Superior Court. And John Lopez, IV, a Solicitor General for the state of Arizona. He's worked in the U.S. Attorney's Office and served in Iraq as a legal advisor. And it's history in the making with the appointment of Lopez. The 48-year-old is the first Hispanic to serve on the Arizona Supreme Court. A pivotal move for the state, says political commentator Mario Diaz.
If one believes in that government is of the people, by the people, and for the people, then one should recognize that parity is important. Let me give you some statistics. So Tucson has a 40% population of Latinos. The city of Phoenix is 42%. The state is 31%. No Supreme Court justices reflect the Latino population. Across the country, 3% of Supreme Courts are of Latino descent. So we have a long ways to go, but this is a start, and this is a celebration, and thankful to Governor Ducey for making this appointment.
The 2 justices are Republicans. Earlier this year, Governor Ducey signed a law expanding the state's highest bench from 5 to 7 justices. On to some sports news now. The Arizona Territorial Cup is back in the hands of the Arizona Wildcats. Considered one of the longest rivalries in the U.S., the ASU Sun Devils and the Arizona Wildcats began the rivalry back in 1889. This year, the game played at Arizona Stadium, and the Wildcats took the trophy with a 56-35 victory. And to even lighter news now, literally, snowfall in the desert. Freezing temperatures welcome snow to the higher elevations of Arizona this week. Melissa Seveny from the Arizona Science Desk captured this photo of the first snowfall in the Grand Canyon. And then in Flagstaff, some 5 inches fell. And to the east, from the town of Alpine, Genevieve Gallardo snapped this picture for us. And that's our program. For all of us at Arizona Public Media, I'm Lorraine Rivera. Thanks for joining us.